Ron, again. So this is part 2 or part 3?
Part 2.
Part 2 of our container journey today. And this one's going to be thematic. We talked about cultural stuff at the first one, the types of pots you can use, the different types of soil medium that are available, the palette of plants, which is completely wide open to your tastes and your interests, the cultural things about taking care of your pots with fertilizer, watering, good drain soil, soil amendments, all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to talk about during this segment is planting containers for resistance to deer. That list of plants gets smaller and smaller as the clock ticks. Akuba used to be on that list. I'm looking at some across the garden here. They like to eat akuba now. Tim just informed me that
rabbits I've had issue.
The stalwart of tough plants in the garden, carex, rabbits nibble on it. I've not had that happen in previous gardens, but I believe him. He speaks the truth. So this is going to focus on deer because that's a problem in any landscape. My house in Charlotte is in Midtown, right in the midst of all the hullabaloo. And we have deer that feed in my backyard and in my front yard on a pretty regular basis. I've not seen them here. That doesn't mean that they're not in this part.
Fortunately, we're fenced in right here.
We're fenced in and we've got a big interstate next to us, but they're very, very adaptable. So what we're going to talk about are some things that are less interesting to deer to kind of nibble on, but also provide winter, spring, summer, fall interest. And most of these are pretty tough plants. So Tim, if you want to roll through them,
okay.
I can chime in.
We have a variety of things here, and I'll start what's up on here on top. So we actually have, like Greg was saying, some carex here. These are the ones I found that the rabbits just loved here in the garden were carex oceanensis types, and that's what these group are here. And then this is one of the native, I think is this Flacca or no, Laxicolmus, which is blue bunny hob is the cultivar. That one I've had better luck with the deer not eating, and the rabbits not eating, I should say.
Love the color.
But it is great. And I have that one in sun or shade. Yep. They're really versatile. They give you some nice texture year round. So
thank you to our friends at Hoffman's
for David for bringing that along. Just as this represents a group of plants here. This is a Juga repens, which, and one of the cultivars, this is the trade name on this one is, oh darn, I've already forgotten which one it is because we have a whole bunch. This is tropical toucan. But a Juga is in a family of plants called the Lamiaceae, which to me, it's the mint family to you guys. Most, I won't say everything in that family is pretty much deer safe. I mean, everything from lantana to agastaches to mints, your mints. The deer typically don't bother them. Salvias are in there. They often have a pungent odor to them, and that often will discourage them from wanting to eat them. The ajuga is often a great one because it's just so low to the ground and it likes to propagate itself. So even if the deer did nibble it a bit,
they might like it.
They might, but they're not going to destroy that one like they would some of your other plants. Greg brought out a favorite of all of us. I do like Mahonias, and this is actually a fairly uncommon species. It doesn't look like much in a pot, but most of your Mahonias are going to be fine. But again, rabbits. We had one. Volunteers planted a Mahonia out in the mixed border about 3 weeks ago. I noticed, and last week I came by and there were 3 shoots on the ground and 1 on the top. The rabbits don't necessarily eat it, but the deer won't eat these. So I find them great. They're barberry. Someone have lumped them into the barberries, the berberis, but we still keep them out in Mahonia, which I like that name. Great flowers in the fall and winter or spring, depending on the species. And typically yellow, though there are some, and actually there are some in the summer now, but some that have pink or purple tones to them now too. But they get it because they're often so nasty that the deer don't want to eat these.
Very thorny foliage.
They are leathery once they get totally matured. There are some softer ones, or that is less prickly ones, which I do like, gracilis, for instance, gracilipes, and soft cress, which is, I think, a Eurybracteatum. Those are some little friendlier to use ones, but any of your Mahonias are going to be great in your landscape, whether in a container or in the ground, to deal with that neighborhood herd you might have. In general, this is one plant here that I have. This is a pyrosia. This is a type of fern, and I find it very ironic that most ferns deer do not touch. So that's a safe group of plants to incorporate into your landscape. And I don't even think the rabbits have bothered any of my ferns as well. But that, I mean, you never quite know with a rabbit though too. They will come along, and if nothing else, they might just nip it off and spit it back out. Which I find they do fairly often. But this is a really cool one here. This one, it's green right now, but the new flush on this one, it comes up, this is Pyrosia lingua, and it's Alabama gold. And the new growth on it is a gold flush, and then it matures to green. But yeah, it's just starting to grow out a little bit. And these were in the greenhouse, so higher light intensities I think will also bring out more UV to them, should bring out the color a little better. But this is a really cool fern in itself too, and it's great for containers because this is very drought tolerant. This is a species that's epiphytic or lithophytic in the wild in East Asia. So it's accustomed to a periodic drying out without as much harm as, say, those more dainty ferns that you might do that are very airy and feathery and soft. This is actually rather leathery on this one. And this is actually a tongue fern is what they call this one. And I think you can see why on the shape of the leaf on this one. But I really like those as well. And down front, this is one you can use in a container or in the ground, but I think this is one of the smaller ones. This is a eucomis, so pineapple lilies. This is one, and I've forgotten which cultivar. This is dark star. So I have to remember that one came out around the time of some of the newer Star Wars movies. So Dark Star, you know, kind of that same idea. But I was telling Greg, and he's been there as well, but our friend Dan Hinckley out in Washington, we both had been there, and he, on a table outside in his garden, he has containers of eucomis, these smaller flowered eucomis. This one doesn't get as big as eucomis camosis, which is the real common one, or some of the other ones that get a couple feet. This only gets, you know, about 12 inches tall when it's in flower, but you can have it in a container and appreciate it up close. And it's also the benefit, again, that the deer don't bother. This isn't a group of plants which I don't remember where they're putting them now. They used to be in their own family, the Hyacinthaceae. So with our hyacinths, and they're fairly safe for deer. Again, I've noticed rabbits eating my plants in this family recently, which they never used to bother. So my scillas, which are cousins of these, but these will be great in a container to deal with if you have deer problems as well. And for shrub-wise, we have an Alyssium here, and I've heard different things about Alyssium, actually.
I have too. Alyssium is supposed to be relatively safe in terms of deer nibbling on it. It's also called anise shrub.
I love the fragrance.
So it's got the foliage and the twigs and the flowers all have a fragrance that kind of, what's the common spice that smells like that?
Oh, anise.
Anise. I can smell it right
I've
this far
crushed
away
it, yeah.
from breaking it. So there's some talk an idea that keeps deer from eating it. I think when the population of deer is so great, they'll nibble on stuff just to kind of see if it's palatable before they realize, hey, this tastes terrible. Let me go eat those hostas that I see over there or something else. But relatively safe. There's also a lot of history here at the Raulston with some of the development of some of the better landscape cultivars of this particular plant.
Forget what was it? Aztec Fire, I think. Was it JC's?
Aztec Fire.
And then Tom Ranney has introduced a couple newer selections as well from some different breeding. But these all make great container plants, and you can put so many different things in a container. Whether this would be a partial shade to a shade container right here. As you see, I threw together some of the ajuga and threw in some of the pyrosia, and we have the silicium sitting here. Those would all cohabitate very well. And the other thing, using containers, I've had volunteers tell me this though, that you can move the container, but sometimes the deer will get in places you won't expect. So it'll even come up on your deck, for instance, sometimes. So you don't have to worry about these, even if you have that issue that your deer are very adventurous and going where you would not expect to get a snack or to taste things. But I don't know.
Yeah. We've got 10 minutes, so let's go ahead and plant this so we can kind of rehash the planting techniques.
Let's see. Let's take my little stuff out. And you can rearrange it. I just, like I said, threw these together. Sure. Let's see if we can get this.
And again, being conscious of the depth is crucial to keeping the water in the pot. And I'm trying not to make a mess that we got to come back and...
Yeah, I just cleaned this all up yesterday with the volunteers.
They're probably watching. Let's see what that does. That's a horticulture technique that he just...
And this one is just repotted, thank goodness. So it doesn't... There's not a lot of stuff in here that we need to really worry about. So we can either... Do you want to do it centered or do you want it in the back?
I like it in the back. That gives you more room to put stuff in the front.
Okay. How's that look to
Perfect.
you? Okay.
And again, this is the opportune time to put in that fertilizer that'll be down in where the roots are at, so it can kind of start doing its thing and break down with heat and watering.
Let's see.
You want to just hand them to me, Doctor?
Yeah, do you want to? I'll start prepping another one.
So we talked about ajuga. Tim was mentioning how vigorous it is. All that's new growth since it's been in the flat. And you look at that root system.
You don't know how many of these we started with, do you?
No.
We started with one of these of like 5 or 6 different selections a couple years ago. And we made literally hundreds of them by the end of summer.
Don't tell the folks that buy stuff from the plant cart that.
These we haven't sold, to tell you the truth. We have not been good. This is a patented plant. We've used them in the garden, and we have actually given some away. So
taking that new growth into consideration, and that this is a creeper, it's going to grow along the ground until it finds a place to root. So we're going to let that kind of cascade over the side there, and it'll continue to do that, thinking that it might find some place to root down below. And I love the texture of that fern. And Tim talked about the cultivar name with that yellowish new growth. And you can see it just starting on the tips of some of these, but lots of texture, lots of color. It's a very kind of coarse plant. The older leaves have kind of a coppery endomentum on the bottom side of the leaf.
And when the fertile fronds come up, they'll have dots.
Yep.
They'll have the sori.
And you can see the little feet that are reaching for places to kind of anchor itself. And that can kind of dangle over the side also.
I'm going to get that ready for you. And but these are just a few options. This is just what we had in our nursery that we grabbed quickly.
Looking for stuff
ideas.
with color and last minute ideas. But, you know, it's kind of open to your imagination, the different things that you can use. So we haven't decided if we're going to leave these out or not. So next time y'all come to visit, see if you can track them down. And it's okay if they look a little bit lean to start with.
Yes.
They're gonna fill back out. This ajuga, once it gets some moisture and that fertilizer starts to kick in, it's gonna take off with reckless abandon.
Here, do we want to actually? I think some texture like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna put those in. Those would be easier. There, let's put those in.
Yeah. So that being said, we got a bit of a hole here. I'm going to stick this carex here, it'll kind of fill in. I need to add some more soil in there.
Let's see, I don't have a scoop. Ugh.
This is also something that's great to do with kids.
Yes.
This is how I got my daughter interested in plants, although it didn't go much further than containers, unfortunately. It didn't take root, pun intended, but from a very small person, she would help plant our containers every year.
Hey, y'all, we're adding 5 minutes to this segment so you can stretch out.
Oh, great.
Oh, no.
Great. We need 15 minutes. Since we're right at the very end of our plant material. Actually, let's put some of these in here. Why not?
Yeah, those will want a little more sun, but those will be just fine in here condition-wise to these. And actually, this pyrosia is pretty resilient. It'll grow just about anywhere. And I like those.
Another one of the ferns.
The last of my ferns that I brought up.
Ferns.
But we're already getting some color here, you know, and this stuff could be transitioned out through the season too. You don't have to leave it this way. Instead of the eucomis in here, you could put in some colorful annuals for the summer. So
our friend and colleague, Bree Arthur, does a lot of stuff with vegetables
veggies, yes.
in containers. And that's a whole host of ideas and things that are good in containers, especially for folks like Tim and I that live in apartments, don't have a lot of space. So that's always a good thing to do. But in a relatively short span of time, we've got a lot of color and texture going on here.
So speaking of that, kales and cabbages in the fall, winter, you could stick that right in here and it'll contrast, you know, purples and whites. So things right there are something we can do. So, and you mentioned earlier that we were hoping to do, we have quite a few containers that were donated, and we're going to work with those hopefully this summer with our interns. And as you just saw, two of the interns that I worked with now in 2008 and 2009, and that is, David was in 2008. I don't know if he remembers that. He came to me right out of high school. And then Hunter came the following year in 2009 and was an intern as well. So we're going to get the new generation. We're going to get them doing these things as well this summer. So
it's something from a personal perspective that when I did one of my first internships at the Cincinnati Zoo, it was all about color and seasonal display and seasons of interest and urban landscaping. So as an intern myself, that's how I got kind of interested in this realm of horticulture. From an intern perspective, from a career perspective, I know people that just do this. From a career standpoint, I've got some colleagues in Philadelphia that do a lot of containers in the inner city. That's the entire scope of their business. So it's something that once you get that interest, you can kind of take it to that level if need be. Trying to think of other things we could chit chat about here. Talking about containers themselves. One of the benefits of this one that we've used, this is plastic.
Mm-hmm. I can lift this. If this were concrete or clay, I couldn't lift that myself.
If this were concrete, clay, or porcelain, it's going to be very, very hard to move around. Two negatives about the plastic: they don't last as long as some of the harder ones, but they're much easier to move around. If you're cyclical and they go in and out from a seasonality standpoint, much easier to pick up. We could probably lift it off the ground if we wanted to. Let's not hurt ourselves, but very, very easy to transplant. I'm not super crazy about the color of these, but they are very durable and very, very functional. They come in multitudes of sizes.
Yes.
The big ones are good for things like this, for adding the woody things and extending that different palette of plant material. But probably most of the containers that I personally use at home, and you can get them that look like pretty much anything. Most of mine are plastic because mine don't stay out all year long on our deck at home. We put them out, put vegetables and seasonal color in them, and in the wintertime they go under the house for the next season. Easy to transplant, easy to clean out, easy to store, easy to pick up at the garden center and fit in your vehicle.
Yeah. Don't break your back.
Which is very, very important. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier, talking about the medium that's in these, We use the pine bark vines because they're easy to get.
Yes.
We are potting up hundreds, if not thousands, of plants in the nursery, stuff that we're selling, stuff for plant sales. So we get wholesale loads of the pine bark vines. When you've got a pot this big, and most of the roots are going to be in the top 8 to 10 inches of this pot, so they're not going to be all the way down in the bottom. So what I have done with this one, so that we're not using as much soil, is I fill this up probably a third of the way just with plastic. It's lightweight, water's going to pour through it. There aren't going to be any roots down here anyway. I've heard of people using packaging peanuts. I absolutely hate and abhor those little things because they fly everywhere. One thing that I've used in pots is rice hulls. Rice hulls are very, very light. They're porous. Water goes right through them. You could fill this up a third with rice hulls, and you're not using up either the potting mix like we use, or if you're buying it in a bag where it's a little bit expensive. A lot of commercial container companies will do that just to lighten the containers and not have to use as much potting mix. I've used pots, just turning them upside down and staging them in there and pouring the soil through. I think I mentioned this morning, if you've got a container that's someplace where there's a lot of people running by, you may have seen our school groups going by, and if you don't want those pots to tip over, if somebody bumps against them, filling that up a third of the way with Stay-Lite adds some bottom weight to it, and it's also very porous. The water's going to kind of flow right through those. I think that's it for the conditions that we have here. Jumping back to vegetables, some of the, I mean, again, that's open.
The deer might eat them, but you can use these great in a great way to raise your vegetables if you don't have that space. And also, they're up at a level that you can get to them instead of as we get older. Even though I'm not terribly older yet, but
yes.
They're up higher. You can get to them. Keep them off the ground so that rabbit isn't eating your tomato where it's just sitting at the ground. You can have tomatoes in here in the summer. You can have peppers. Peppers are excellent in containers. If you could grow anything from greens like lettuce and spinach in the cooler months, and cabbages, broccoli, cauliflower, all that in here. And you can, again, like we said, interplant. You mentioned Brie Arthur earlier. I've seen her interplant lettuce in the cool months with in containers with other stuff, and then you can
texture.
Yes, and then you can harvest it. You can have a salad that day as well.
There are a lot of cultivars of vegetables that are bred for containers because this has become such a hot topic.
Tomatoes in particular, they've been making money more determinate ones.
Eggplants, which get small. I've seen lots of peppers on the market, which stay kind of small. The nice thing about container growing for vegetables is if you've got a big pot like this, you could take some bamboo and build a trellis so that things could go up. There's dwarf cucumbers that are out now. I don't know about pole beans or stuff.
I mean, you can do that. You can make yourself a little teepee in here.
Yeah.
I was also thinking not necessarily staying small, but something that gets bigger in such a big pot. Yep. Okra would look really cool.
Okra's a great
And there are some red-leafed ones that are, I think, a little bit more compact as well. And then they're at eye level. You can see when they're getting too big or too little to pick. You won't miss them as much. So
if you wanted to get super creative, you could turn something like this into a water garden.
Yeah.
That's one of the benefits of the plastic ones is some of them come without holes pre-drilled in them so that the water drains. So you could just leave it without the pre-drilled holes, or if they've got holes in them already, some liquid nails, some kind of caulking, anything like that, just to kind of plug those holes and fill it up with either wet soil for things like pitcher plants and other things. I've seen them use for that as well.